Thank you guys for joining me back here for the last segment of today's show. Just continuing our running theme, our running segment of looking at teams, each team in the NFL. We're going to go throughout this offseason and start looking at spots where I think they need to upgrade heading into 2025. And looking back at this year, right, specifically at Washington and the kind of year that they had, they really got to revel at how far they truly got. And I don't think it's really set in for a ton of people that, like, they made it to, like, I can't even say it. Like, they made it to the NFC Championship game with a rookie quarterback with a roster of 1 year guys on 1 year deals. And, like, they ended up one game away from being in the Super Bowl playing for everything in just their first year under a relatively new ownership group, new general manager, new head coach, a bunch of new guys on this roster, and they made it all work together. They found a common ground, and they got to be one of the best four teams in the NFL, which is an insane thing to think about, and I don't think it's really set in for a lot of people, but now, that's obviously in the past, right? We're talking about reveling in it, but looking forward, right? You got this. You're playing with fire now. You managed to capture lightning in a bottle. So how do you take advantage of it right now going forward into 2025? Well, the first spot you could look at would be free agency, and not in the best way possible for the Commanders because they got a lot of pivotal pieces that are going to hit the free agent market if they don't re-sign them by the time we get there, right? Like guys like Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Diami Brown, Noah Brown, Jeremy Chin, Dante Fowler, among a lot more that I could have said. But those are some of their heavy hitters that could leave their team this offseason. And it's not only about like talking about this segment and improving, it's also about making sure that you're back to the same level and making sure that you bring back some of those guys that got you to that NFC Championship game, right? Not losing on some of those massive pieces like Bobby Wagner was, like Zach Ertz was, and the relationship he had with Jayden Daniels, Diami Brown. He had crazy games in the playoffs for whatever reason, right? It's not a guy that you probably expected that out of, but he, I think, has earned the right to stay on this team. Noah Brown dealt with some injuries, but I thought he was doing well. Jeremy Chin also. All those guys that I mentioned should be returning to the Commanders, hopefully for their sake. But, with a lot of free agents, the Commanders are fortunate to have the third most cap space in the NFL. They're at $78 million, so they should have a lot of leeway to bring back some of the guys that they feel also should be back. But in terms of getting back to the same level, also improving now, I identified the three spots where I think they need the most help. Those being wide receiver, obviously, that's my number one. Defensive line, just improving on both run game, run defense, and their pass rush, I think is huge. And their secondary, those spots, I think they definitely need to improve. And we're going to start off with number one, with the wide receiver spot. Obviously, I've been talking about it all year. I had my reservations about the Commanders because I thought this would be such a huge hole that I didn't think they were going to get too far, but they proved me wrong. Obviously, Jayden Daniels proved to be the player that everybody thought he could be, but also a lot better than a lot of people expected him to. So, Terry was awesome this year. He had a career year. Again, I mentioned Diami Brown had a very good year, a breakout year, if you will. But I think to where this team is now and where they could elevate to, they need to bring in like a household name or something like that, especially with that much cap space. They got to do something to add and help out to Terry McLaurin, especially. Oh, I forgot to mention that Brian Thomas is going to be a free agent this year as well. So whether they decide to bring him back, then you could add running back potentially to this spot. But that's also another one I failed to mention. But really wide receiver and taking advantage of Jayden Daniels' talent and whatnot and things like that. I think in free agency, you got to look at some of the bigger fish like T. Higgins and Chris Godwin. I think both of those guys should be, at least one of them has to be on the Commanders, right? If they want to really, make a stand and make a statement in free agency and, kind of let everybody else know that, like, this past season was great and, we accomplished a lot, but we're just not just going to go away now. Like, we're going to really try and cement this as a routine thing for us to be in the playoffs. So I would love for them to get T. Higgins. I think that would be an amazing partnership with him, Terry, and Jayden Daniels. I think that would be great for him. Or even Chris Godwin. He was having a great year until he fractured his ankle. So either one of those guys, they're not going to get both. Let's not get crazy, but one of them, I think one of them would be great for them to add. I'm hoping it's T. Higgins, and I say that also because in the draft, you can get guys in the later rounds, obviously, but at number 1 in the first round, I think the consensus top 5 guys that you would add would probably be gone by number 29, so I would reserve the draft and that spot in the first round for defensive line or potentially secondary if they feel like that's a spot they want to go with in the draft. But that's why I think free agency would be my preferred destination for a wide receiver. That's the first place I'm going, and I'm calling T. Higgins right away to gauge his interest. So that's my top priority, but then we go to defensive line and improving that run defense that was one of the worst in the NFL, and even that pass rush a little bit, because I like Cleveland Farrell, I like Dante Fowler, I like the guys in the middle, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. Those guys are awesome, but you need a little bit more, right? I think the Eagles game showed us that a lot in how they rushed it in for seven rushing touchdowns. So you're going to need to improve this front a lot. And I would like to bring back, guys like Fowler and Cleveland Farrell, but again, it's about getting better. So if you're going to bring guys like that back in, you still got to add a lot of pieces to this defensive line. And I think just going off of yesterday and looking at 2 guys that are going to be free agents, Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, they showed yesterday what kind of championship level of play they could bring. Josh Sweat was everywhere. Milton Williams was a menace in that middle of that Eagles defensive line, and both of them are going to be free agents. So not only are you going to get tremendously better if you target guys like that, but also you're going to be making the Eagles weaker. So that would be something that would be phenomenal for the Commanders if they went out and signed a guy like Milton Williams or Josh Sweat. It feels like Dan Quinn loves picking off of NFC East rivals, right? He took a lot of Cowboys players with him, so this time, go over to Philadelphia and start shopping there. I think that would be something that would be a great fit, or he could go back to Dallas and take Osa Odigizua from the Cowboys. That would be a phenomenal signing as well. There's talks about Myles Garrett. I mean, if you want to talk about making a statement, going out and trading for a guy like Myles, I mean, that would cost you, obviously, your draft pick, a lot of draft picks, but I think Myles, you add him to this defense and they add guys to this defensive line around him already, like, this defense would be revolutionized. With a guy like that, a generational talent like that, it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair to add someone like that to this defense, and immediately it would shoot them up to like top 3 team in the NFC. If they got better, in some of these other spots and they added Myles, like their Super Bowl window would start as soon as he was traded there. I think that would be awesome for him to go there, but a trade like that, you'd have to wait a while. So that would be something. But also you got the draft, and at number 29, if they don't trade it away, you're looking at guys like Derek Harmon, James Pierce Jr., Walter Nolan potentially. I've seen him in mock drafts go from anywhere from like top 8 to like at number 24, 25. So, he's a little bit all over the place, but those sort of guys will be there around 29 if they decide to go with defensive line. But also, I mentioned secondary as another spot that I really think the Commanders would benefit from upgrading, because I have this at number 3 because I like Lattimore. I really like Mike Sanders still out of Michigan and how he plays for them. But he's definitely more of an inside kind of guy. I would like to see them add another top-tier defensive back across from Marshawn Lattimore, and then you have Mike Sanders still in the middle as well. That would be one of the best trios of defensive backs in the NFL. But you also got to worry about keeping guys like Jeremy Chin. Hopefully he stays, and they still even need to add a guy to Jeremy Chin as well, again, if he decides to stay. But, this free agent class, this free agent group in the secondary is loaded with so many guys that you could add, right? Immediately at the top, you're thinking of guys like TJ Reed from the New York Jets. Charvarius Ward is a free agent, and I'm sure the Commanders would love to add him, obviously, across from Lattimore. Javon Holland is a great safety option. Byron Murphy Jr. from the Minnesota Vikings would be an intriguing option. Staying in the NFC North with Carlton Davis, he was having a great year before he got hurt. So at corner, I think wide receiver and corner would be spots that this Commanders team would surely really like to address in free agency, because you got so many very solid options in free agency. And in the draft, you also got guys like Jahdae Barron, Azare Thomas, who I really like out of Florida State, Maxwell Hairston, Malachi Starks potentially at safety if you wanted to add that to Jeremy Chin or as a replacement of Jeremy Chin. They got a ton of options. They got a ton of options and a lot of cap space. So the Commanders have really planned this out perfectly to where, they hit it out of the park with Jayden, right? It even exceeded their expectations. So they built it out so perfectly that this has really worked out so quickly that now you're heading into a very exciting time where if you add the right pieces to this very exciting project that you have already, you could be cooking with something legitimately next season already. This offseason is one of the most important for this Commanders franchise, and this past season was one of the most important seasons for them to change the course of this organization with drafting a guy like Jayden. Now comes the hard part at staying in this group of top NFC teams, and this offseason is even more important than last offseason, right? Because now you're not surprising anybody. You're not the underdog, most likely. You're going to be on everybody's like watch list, right? You're not going to be this underdog, like rookie, young team anymore, right? So you're going to have to do a lot this offseason to maintain that level, but also exceed it, because there's a lot of good teams in the NFC. So I'm excited for the Commanders. I think this is something cool to see for an organization to change that quickly. So I'm hoping they make all the right moves in free agency. So with that being said, they got a lot of stuff to get to, but for us on this show, that is everything we're going to get to cover on today's episode. I want to thank you guys for joining me on this episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And on that note, if you want to see more of this show, go check out the GSMC Sports Network and the GSMC Podcast Network on YouTube to see more content around the NFL, more coverage of free agency that's coming up. We're going to talk a little bit more about the draft, more on the Super Bowl, obviously, and the fallout of everything. All of that stuff with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. And remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as tuning in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll sign off for now, and I hope to see you guys all back here again tomorrow, same time, joining me for another show.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to